Catskill Mountain Cleaning, specializing in Airbnbs, vacation homes, cleaning, ironwood stay, trash removal, small pest exterminating, serving the Catskills region, including Martin and the more information at 607-261-1674. CatskillMountainCleaning.com. Sidewalks upstate. And tourism salary with vacation rentals outside. New York State produced music and food choices. Sidewalks upstate. Striker and Gilbert. Sidewalks.com. 1053 Main Street Gallery in Parchments. Sidewalks is space to support a vibrant, active artistic community. 1053 Main Street Gallery is located in the historic, renovated Eichmann's Telephone Building, Thursday through Sunday. Information about 1053 Main Street Gallery, Eichmann's, and upcoming exhibitions at 1053 Main Gallery.
Hi, this is Andy King, host of the Andy King Show on WIOX Roxbury. If you listen to my program, you know how passionate I am about music and community radio. What you may not know is that I'm just as passionate about community solar energy. Delaware River Solar is a community solar company set up to provide an easy and accessible way to begin participating in renewable energy, and it doesn't involve installation of solar panels. It's designed to be efficient, clean, and keep tons of carbon emissions out of the air. Delaware River Solar, a supporter of WIOX, is a solar energy company for Catskills region community. And when it comes to community, well, you can count me in. I'd be happy to share the details about Delaware River Solar at 845-586-2058 or andy.cahill@DelawareRiverSolar.com.
Welcome to Catskills Commerce. I'm Ray Pucci, and as president of the Delaware County Chamber of Commerce, I am honored and thrilled just about every day to work with the most interesting, most optimistic, and the most energized people I think I've met ever in my life. Local business owners, their staffs, and together, and that's really the key word here, folks, together we move our local economy forward. The Chamber believes that healthy communities start with healthy businesses. We support our entrepreneurs by advocating for public policies that create an environment in which private enterprise may thrive. We promote our region as a great place to live, to learn, to work, to visit, and to play. We create programs that enhance our communities, build our capacity, and improve our quality of life. We believe in collaboration, and we believe that the surest way to success is a partnership among business, government, community groups, and education that is mutually beneficial and based in respect, trust, and honesty. Finally, the Chamber believes in the potential of this region, our residents, our institutions, and all who call this special place home, or who have an interest in our collective success. It's pretty simple, but that's the message. That's the purpose of this program. And a lot of things that we do that I do at the Delaware County Chamber, and that's to spread the news that we remain a vibrant and a diverse place. here in the Catskill Mountains of New York State. Well, thanks for joining me this afternoon, folks. I have a really interesting program for you. I have a couple guests who I'm thrilled that they've agreed to spend some time with me here on the radio this afternoon. I have a couple of the New York State Deputy Comptrollers. This is a big deal. So I'll be introducing them in just a moment, but I just want to kind of set the stage a little bit. You know, one of the things we're a community radio station. I'm not, most of the hosts are kind of impartial, and those who do talk programs, we're all passionate. This is why we do this. We're all volunteers here at WIOX. But this is very much of a first person type of radio program. As the chamber president, I bring some of the folks who I think are really interesting, who have news, who are the news makers, to you on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, to meet, to discuss some issues, and that's my promise. That's my promise to you, to continue to do that. And today's no exception. Joining me via Zoom are Maria Doulis and Elliot Auerbach. They're both, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, they're both deputy comptrollers within the office of the New York State Comptroller, Tom DiNapoli. And if you're a faithful listener to this program, you've heard Comptroller DiNapoli, a recording of a program that we did several months ago here on this radio program, talking about lots of different issues. But today we're going to focus on really two issues with Maria and with Elliot. I figure I can, Tom, if Comptroller DiNapoli said I can call him by his first name, no one's waving their arms at me on Zoom, so I think I can use first names here. We're going to be talking about a couple issues that are really important to business owners here in Delaware County and the Catskill Mountains. One is the incredible $9 billion with a B in debt that New York State is facing right now in its unemployment trust fund, and what impact that's going to have on business. And a little bit later on, we're going to talk about some really good news, a significant increase in sales tax revenue here in Delaware County not only during the month of August, but really all throughout 2021. And increases that not only beat what we did in 20, which frankly, that wasn't that much of an achievement, but we're ahead of where we were in 2019, and that's more important. Before by way of introducing my guests, let me tell you a little bit about these folks. Maria Doulis joined the state comptroller staff just in February of this year, and is a recognized expert on New York State budget and fiscal issues. Most recently, she was vice president for strategy, operations, and communications at the Citizens Budget Commission. She has a bachelor's degree in political science from Queens College, a master's degree in public administration from George Washington University, and completed her doctoral studies at the Wagner School for Public Policy down at NYU. Elliot Auerbach has been the Deputy Comptroller for Local Government and School Accountability since 2019. Prior to that, well, let me start. He's a graduate of Hofstra University. That's something Elliot and I share. He's a couple years older than I am, but let's not tell him. And prior to accepting that position as Deputy Comptroller, he served as the Ulster County Comptroller for 4 terms, as well as a 3-term mayor for the village of Ellenville. and Elliot and his team are responsible for monitoring the finances of local governments as well as school districts. Elliot, Maria, thank you both for joining me here this afternoon. And I appreciate you spending some time here with me. Are you able to hear me out there?
I can hear you, Ray. Yes.
Wonderful. Maria, are you with us?
I think you need to let her in.
Oh, she jumped out. Oh, dear. She's going to be joining us in a minute. Thanks for that, Elliot. Sometimes technology is our friend and sometimes not so much. Maria, thanks for joining me. Unmute yourself on there on Zoom if you would. There, thank you so much for joining me. You missed a lovely introduction that I made. Elliot, I think can vouch for me on that one.
I can, yes.
Hi. Sorry about
Hi.
technical difficulties, but thanks for having us on.
Well, thank you. Maria, let's start with you. Let's talk what's happening right now in unemployment. New York State's Unemployment Trust Fund has about a $9 billion, that's with a B, folks, in debt. And our employers are starting to feel the pinch in higher rates. How did we get here?
Well, as I'm sure it's news to no one listening to your show, the pandemic and the public health measures that were implemented to tackle the growing caseloads had a devastating impact on the state's economy. And about 2 million jobs were lost, which caused claims to quickly swell. And so I think what your audience probably understands, but many people do not, is that, there is a broad conception that, oh, the federal government just pays for unemployment benefits. And that's not actually right. Right? It's taxes on employers that fund the state's trust fund that then pay out benefits to those seeking claims. And while in this case, the state of emergency was so great that the federal government did back a lot of emergency benefits and expansions to unemployment, it's really the state's trust fund that paid out, at least initially, most of the claims.
Mm-hmm.
And so we saw in the second quarter, of 2020, a 1,000% increase in claims against the fund over the prior year. So the volume of claims so overwhelmed the fund that they had to seek a loan from the federal government. And part of what the dynamic there is that the fund was not very well positioned prior to this crisis to withstand even perhaps a garden variety recession, if you will. So New York has often been in the position where its state trust fund will have to seek a loan from the federal government. And that happened during the Great Recession as well. And there were some adjustments made in order to repay that loan quicker.
Mm-hmm.
That included increased rates to employers and changes to the design. But even with those changes and the repayment of the prior loan and the ability of the fund to get to a balance of about $2.6 billion prior to the pandemic, the federal government's review indicated that that probably wasn't good enough for the state to handle even a regular recession, given the volatility of its economy. And so, this was devastating. Clearly, it was not something the state could prepare for in its entirety. But the reality is it now owes $9 billion to the feds. State rates on employers have already increased. And now employers in the midst of this recovery are faced with growing federal unemployment tax rates that could really hinder the recovery and their ability to add jobs.
Maria, let's talk just for a moment to let everyone know how unemployment is structured. You said that there's a federal piece, there's a state piece, there's a piece that employers pay. New York State legislature last year suspended the experience rating piece of that. But you're right, everyone's employers' unemployment costs have all increased. Can you give folks an idea of how that fund is structured or how those payments are structured?
Right. So employers pay a tax on each eligible employee on a certain part of the wages that are paid to those employees. And there's a state piece to this, which is the most significant, and a small federal piece. And the state tax is really determined by two factors.
Mhm.
One of them is the employer's own experience. It's what we call the experience rating, right? And it's, what is the past history of people who have been laid off, who have gone to the unemployment fund seeking benefits coming directly from that employer. And so those who have a greater history of laying off employees tend to pay a higher rate in order to compensate for greater use of their former employees of the fund. The second element there is how much is actually available in the state's unemployment trust fund. So the rates on everyone, even those employers who rarely use the fund, will grow when the fund balance is low or, as it is now, in a deficit.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got those two moving pieces, and they've already, you're right that the state said, well, the pandemic was such an emergency and drastic situation, we will not hold your experience in the last 12 months or so against you. But that doesn't sort of preclude the fact that now the money has to be repaid.
Yeah.
And so the rates will, the rates have increased on the state side and will continue to increase on the small federal rate will continue to increase until that money is repaid.
So you've laid out the problem extremely well and very clearly. Where do we go from here? What are the steps to resolve this?
Yeah, so, we should probably note that to the extent our economy in New York continues to make a comeback and we bring more employees on the rolls, it'll probably help alleviate this a little bit. But again, employers, even those with positive experience ratings, will see this line item in their budgets grow by 100 or maybe 200% over the last 2 years. So it is a serious challenge for business.
Well, I can certainly speak to, someone who runs a small not-for-profit with essentially 1.5 full-time equivalent employees. We are certainly in 2021 seen a bump in our unemployment rates.
Yes, indeed. And so I think that the answer lies again in many ways with the federal government. So one thing that the federal government has done that it could continue to do is to waive the interest. Like any loan, the federal government charges interest for the loan that the state has received. And so it could waive the interest as it did in the early months. The second thing it could do is to acknowledge that, again, this is kind of a once in a generation or maybe even a lifetime crisis. And perhaps it could absolve some of the loans taken by states to say, these will be damaging, we understand, and we're going to socialize that cost across the nation. The other avenue that is available to the state is to consider using some of the federal relief funding that it received under the American Rescue Plan and place it, put it towards the loan that it's received from the federal government. So the case, that money is now spoken for in the state's financial plan. However, the state has realized greater than expected tax revenue collections of about $5 billion or $6 billion almost in the current year. And so there is a little bit of flex in the budget. And certainly many other states have taken this approach where they've said, okay, we've got this relief package. We're looking at the pieces and what we want to direct it towards. And we will use a piece of this relief aid to shore up, to repay our loans and to shore up the trust fund. And that is permissible under the aid. So that would be another avenue for the state to look at its resources, really assess its tax collections, and think about dedicating some excess revenues towards the trust fund.
So what's the next step? Who's, not to use a sports analogy, but to use a sports analogy, in whose court is this ball now laying?
Well, to use another, I can't make the call because I'm not, the ref here. I think I botched that metaphor. But so I can't sort of, make a prediction, and I have no bets on what will happen at the federal level. I think certainly at the state level, as the new governor, really starts to get settled and look at the financial plan and, the costs that may arise, but also what is available in additional resources and where she would like to take the state. This may be something that she could consider, and there could be action at the state level to direct some resources towards the trust fund.
When does this have to happen? Is there a deadline when action needs to take place?
Well, the interest, the expiration date on waiving the interest has come and gone. So the
Okay.
interest is ticking. I suppose that there could be legislation or regulation at the federal level at any time to waive that or to roll that back. And from the states, if history is a guide here, it will take employers many years to repay this loan and shore up the fund. And so, it's not an issue that's going to go away. And it is something for which the governor and policymakers can kind of continue to monitor the financial situation and the fiscal picture of the state and determine whether it's something that they want to devote resources to in the budget.
And just to extend what you just said, so the role of the state comptroller and you as and Elliot as deputy comptrollers is to make folks aware of what's happening. And you're not policymakers, but to make sure that the folks in those policy making positions understand the implications, and then it's up to folks like me, I suppose, and others to advocate to those policymakers saying, hey, we got a problem here. We need to correct this. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's absolutely right. And, the Comptroller DiNapoli continues to be, monitor the economy and the recovery very closely. We've only regained about 55% of the jobs that we've lost in the state. And, he understands how important it is to make sure that we have a robust and equitable recovery. And, this is something that will impact that. So you're exactly right. The office is flagging it as an issue that deserves to be in the public debate and as part of the discourse on the budget.
Excellent. Elliot, I want to bring you into this conversation because it sure sounds like the news that you have about recent sales tax data could be part of the solution of the problem that Maria just outlined. Please give us some good news here.
Well, I think you've touched on it earlier, Ray. The good news is that our sales tax collection is up. It's exceeded both the 2020 year and also the pre-pandemic year of 2019. So it is showing that the economy, at least using that as a measure, is moving in the right direction. I just want to go back, though, to an earlier introduction that you did and mention both you and I as Hofstra alum, but you neglected to mention that Comptroller DiNapoli himself is also a Hofstra alum.
Absolutely.
So we have a triangle here.
I think, Elliot, I think that's the only reason I get to call him by his first name.
Okay, I got you. But I just returned back from a few days with the New York State Conference of Mayors with Comptroller DiNapoli, talking to elected officials throughout the state. And of course, one of the focuses that we discussed was the sales tax and its impact on local government, but also its indication of how the economy has started to right-size itself and where it is going. And I looked at Delaware County specifically, and I have to admit that I contributed to some of the sales tax because I spent some time in Andes and Bovina and Margaretville. So
And I didn't get a phone call? I'm hurt.
I've sprinkled a little money throughout Delaware County.
Well, we appreciate all of that.
But you know, the county itself was an interesting study, specific to the last, I would say the last year, and watching the sales tax trends go up and compare it to the year before. And Delaware County, with the exception of probably January and February, which were pretty much stagnant months, March, April, May, June, July, August, just continue to rise, Ray.
Yeah.
And that's indicative of really what's happening all across the 57 counties outside of the metropolitan area. So it's a great sign.
You know, and you mentioned the increase in Delaware County, and year over year, or should I say year over year or month over month? I don't know, year over year for the month of August, I guess. Revenues for sales tax revenues in Delaware County increased 76%.
Correct.
That's astounding.
Correct. And again, it's trending up, which is that just wasn't a one-off. That was, you know, an escalation for the last at least 4 or 5 months. So that's a healthy indication of what's happening. And it wasn't just all my money that I spent there that really drove that up. So, but that's a wonderful thing. You know, we're really concentrating now. We used to wait quarterly to do our sales tax reports, but now we are watching it on a month by month basis. And it will give us an opportunity to see which direction it's going early, as opposed to waiting for that quarter to get over, and let counties and cities and villages and towns know what's happening outside their front door.
Well, you know, the Delaware County Chamber is the tourism promotion agent for Delaware County, and like a lot of my colleagues around the state, we watch those sales tax numbers. That's one of the metrics that we use to see how successful our program may be. And seeing those reports now monthly, sure, is a great help to those budget directors at the municipal levels, but it's a great help for us too, because it gives us some more immediate feedback. So thank you for introducing those monthly reports now. And I know, you know, the numbers that we're looking at right now really are aggregated numbers. They're just totals. Do you have any sense of, or when might we get some sense of looking at those numbers in terms of online sales versus retail, more traditional sales?
Right. No, it's a question that's constantly asked, Ray. You know, we rely on the Tax and Finance Division to provide us that information. But what I did in anticipation of that question, Ray, is really look a little closer at Delaware County to see where internet sales fit in the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And you know, surprisingly, it was, I mean, well, let me say this. We look back, I think we look back for the last 12 months in Delaware County. So about a little under 6% of your total sales tax was a result of internet sales, which is interesting, you know, and that's a healthy for the county itself, because that's indicative of people spending money in county.
Yeah.
Online. So that's a very positive number. Now, of course, there'll be adjustments and tweaks to all of this, but again, I asked my folks to give me that snapshot, and that's what they were able to glean based on the numbers that we've received from Tax and Finance. So,
well, you just made my afternoon.
well, as a kid who grew up in the family hardware store, I know what it means for someone to walk through your door as a local vendor, local retailer, and the importance of those footsteps on a daily basis coming through the door of the store and spending money there. So I know how important this is.
You know, and when we look at you mentioned about the escalation every month in sales tax revenue here in Delaware County. And that was kind of the case in 2020 as well. You know, we certainly were kind of flat throughout the first 8 months, nine months almost. But then sales tax revenue in the fall last year in 20 really took off. And if we can match that same pace, we're in Delaware County, we're going to be exceeding the our total numbers for 2020, I suspect, well, probably right about today, or something close to today. And what's also, I think, significant to note is, as you mentioned earlier, Elliot, that not only, you know, sure, we are exceeding 2020 numbers, and in some ways that's not a great threshold to beat, but we are ahead of 2019 numbers. In fact, in Delaware County, you look at, we're about 15%, running about 15% for that month over 19. And even looking at 21 versus 20, we're coming in about 35% over last year, which is the second highest rate increase by percentage in New York State. Number one was our friends to the south in Sullivan County at 38%. So the fact that we're both in the Catskill region, I think also speaks to a couple things. One is, you know, we've had this great question, are people staying who relocated here, who are using their second homes, who are making that move from the metropolitan area? Are they staying? And the second is our tourism promotion program working? And I think we can say yes to both. I'm not looking for an endorsement from you on that, but you know, I think something's happening here in Delaware County and the Catskills. That's a good thing.
Yeah, no, I agree, Ray. You know, as a kid who grew up in the Catskills and has a good sense of what's happening in Sullivan County, Delaware County, Ulster County, Orange County, you can feel the vibration. I don't have to tell you, there's a hum that's going on right now throughout the entire Catskill Mountain area. I'm going to be honest with you, I could not believe the buzz in Andes, New York last month when I was there on a Saturday, and what was happening there. I looked around, I said, hey, where are all these people coming from? That's the first thing. And B, just took advantage of looking around at the beauty of what's there. So that's the magnet that's going to draw things in. But Ray, let me just give you one caveat. And the caveat is that we've taken the tax and finance numbers to project 23, 24 down the road. And sales tax is going to continue to climb, it looks like, but there will be a flattening, at least projected by tax and finance or the budget division in that 23, 24, 24, 25 year. So we're telling folks, you know, we may be fat and happy now, just, you know, be aware that down the road, there may be a flattening of that sales tax.
Well, we're going to party until then.
Good for you. Good for you.
And we're going to take full advantage of that, and your reports are going to be key to keeping that party going here in Delaware County. Elliot, Maria, thank you both so much for spending all this time with me this afternoon, explaining a really couple very critical issues for businesses here in Delaware County and throughout New York State, frankly. And really bringing some clarity to that issue. So thank you both for joining me, and Elliot, please say hello to our Hofstra pal when you see him next.
I certainly will. Thank you, Ray. Thanks.
Thank you both.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Boy, I got a lot more to tell you about, folks.